Alright, in this video we are going to actually build the project that is what I would consider the minimum requirement for your project. Now you can do anything else that you want, but if you wanted to do an animated title, that's what we're going to do. So you should have first watched the tutorials, the SketchUp tutorials, and then you'll have a good idea of how to use the basic tools. So let's start with a file, new from template. Okay, and then we get to choose a template, and I like to work in the woodworking inches model template. So we have our new model, and the scale just seems to work because of some of the things that we'll need to do when we're importing the text. So right away we can see our X, Y, and Z axis, and so those three axes, of course, are going to help us to orient our model. So what we want to do is, in the View menu, tool palettes, let's open up our large tool set. Okay, and that will bring in this tool set right here. Okay, so in that tool set, you will see right here a 3D text tool. Okay, so you click that, and you get this little 3D text thing. And so whatever text font that you used before, and if you haven't, there's just a default one. We'll talk about the fonts here. Click on fonts, and then you can pick any kind of font that you want. Now, I was building that Mat 120 logo, and so Impact was the typeface that I used, and so I'm going to select Impact. Okay, you'll see here that I think the height is by default 10, so let's just go ahead and make that 10 inches. And then that's all you need to do. You close that up. It'll change the enter text word to your chosen typeface. Now you can pick anything you want, right? This is just what I'm doing here. So I'm going to just type in Mat 120 online, okay, which was that model that I'd built. Okay, I'll center it, and our extrusion will be, I think the default is 4, and so we'll just use 4 and then 10 inches for the height. And let's just see how that looks. You might have to think around with it a little bit, and if it's not right, it's easier just to start again. So let's just place that. And that doesn't look too bad, right? It looks pretty good. So I usually just try to put it right up against the corner right there, and then you click to release it. Now, what's happening here is that, and I don't know why exactly, but you'll notice that it's not oriented towards the front. Now, you probably should have had your camera views reviewed in one of the tutorials, but you'll see top, bottom, blah, 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 right? And so if we look at it from the front, we're actually looking at it from the bottom, right? So that's a problem. So we'll go back to camera, standard views, and we'll go back to ISO, which is the kind of the three-dimensional view. Now, the other thing we want to do when we're working with this, at least for starters, is we want to go into the View menu, and we want to, wait a second, hold on, what am I looking for? Oh, I'm sorry, it's in camera. And you want, notice there's perspective and there's parallel projection. Okay, and there's 2 point, we won't get into that. Perspective is what we see when we're actually looking at the world. You know, when you're looking at a straight road, at some point it appears as though it hits the horizon and it turns into a dot. And we all know that that doesn't happen. That's what perspective is. Parallel projection, on the other hand, is the actual model without distortion. In other words, we're seeing it like it really is. It looks a little bit weird, but that's because there's no perspective on it. Okay, so that's when we first start working with it, that's how we want to work with it, because we don't want the distortion of the perspective. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to go to camera, and we want to go to the right or left side. It doesn't really matter which one. A lot of it has to do with your with the kind of letter forms you have. So I'm going to zoom in here, and fortunately for this particular model, I have a flat edge, and if I rotate this around, the mat has a flat edge. Certain letters like S's and C's and so on, those letters are obviously rounded, and some typefaces, like a script typeface, won't have any flat edges either. And the reason I say this is because if I look at it from the top view, we'll see it straight on. That straight edge is important because what we're going to do next is we are going to rotate this 90 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to go to my standard views, and I'm going to go to my, I'll just go to my right side, and I'm looking at the E over here. We can see the 3 E's. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to rotate this 90 degrees up so that the orientation of the text is the same orientation as our environment. And this is important because the camera, which is what we're going to use to animate, works better if the model's in a normal orientation. So this little rotator tool here, you get this little kind of a protractor sort of tool, and you'll see that it'll want to sort of attach to whatever you're looking at. Now you'll notice that I'm attached to the red axis, which is good. This is what we want, and I want to attach this thing to the lower left corner of my letter form. Okay, somewhere in here. It doesn't matter exactly where. And so then you click to release it, and then you'll see this little whoa thing going on, right? So this is our controller tool. Okay, and so what this does is that as you start to rotate it, once I click and rotate, I can rotate the model. So I want to pull my little dashed line out, probably to about here. The closer it is, the touchier it gets. So the further out, the more control you have. So then you click again once to attach it, and then you can rotate it. And then once I've got my type rotated to the vertical, I click again to release it. And then I'm done with the tool. I can click on the little pointer tool, and now I'm done. Now when I go to my camera and I look at my standard views and I go to front view, and you'll notice there's command 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. As you get better at this program, you might consider learning these, because if you're looking at different points of view, you will it's faster to learn the keyboard commands. Okay, you learn that the scroll wheel zooms in and out. Okay, that's cool. All right, so the next thing we want to do is, let's click on that for a moment. Notice it has a black outline, and I'm going to orbit, which is the O key. I'm going to just orbit. And notice we have these black outlines, right? Those are going to show up in our model, and we probably don't want to do that. So what we want to do is, in our view, we have edge styles. So we'll turn off edges, and we will also turn off profiles. And so now we have our model without the outside edges, and then when we apply color or texture to it, it'll look real, or it'll look a lot more real anyways. Okay, so once we have that, we want to add a color or a texture to it. So in our windows, we will find our materials. Okay, so in our materials, and so when we get our materials open, we have a variety of different things. We've got textures, we've got colors, we get spectrum, and so on. Textures are the most fun, and you can do some strange things with it. You've got a lot of different kinds of textures. We've got materials for like making concrete blocks. And all you have to do when you want to apply a texture is to click on it, and then the little paint bucket shows up, and you just drop it on. And if you don't like it, you could just go to something else. Glass and mirrors, we'll click on that, see what happens. Sometimes not much, ooh, that's cool, kind of a glass effect. So there's a variety of built-in textures that you can use. Okay, kind of cool stuff. All right. If you want to add your own texture, you just click on color and go down to new texture, and then it will ask you to go find something. And then you go find a JPEG, not a PS, I guess it does support PSDs. But you can, find a texture, and that's what that texture looks like, for example. And then you hit open, and then it will import there. And so when we import this, it will give you these options. Okay, so obviously this is huge, right? Our width is 10 inches, I believe, right? So let's make it 10, and our height was, I believe it was 4. So we'll go 4. And let's see how that looks. So we'll hit close, and then let's apply the texture. You click on it, and then you click on it. Okay, so clearly it didn't quite work out, right? So obviously we need to do something to the actual model, to the mapping itself. And so that's just a matter of playing around with the different numbers. So our width, maybe it does need to be a lot more. Let's try 200 and see what happens. And our height will be, okay, let's just see. Okay, well, that's a little better. Getting a little closer. Let's go with 400 and see what happens. Come on. No, we want 400 and not about 400. We just want 400. And then this is looking good enough for government work. You can dink around with these numbers and see what happens. Okay, so we'll close that, and we'll say, okay, that's fine. And so then that's our model. Okay, and so if we just orbit around that, I'm going to close the colors up. And again, if we just orbit around that, we can kind of take a look at how it looks. You can see the depth's a little bit weird, but that's okay. We're not trying to be, Pixar here. We're just trying to get the job done and make it look kind of cool. All right, so that's our model. And in the next video, we'll talk about animating. Okay.